Local rapper and Grammy winner Lil Durk is being held behind bars in South Florida, charged in a murder-for-hire plot back in 2022.
The FBI says he was arrested while trying to flee the country.
Lil Durk is charged in a murder-for-hire scheme. We're working right now to get more details on this investigation, but we know the 32-year-old was arrested Thursday by U.S. Marshals in Florida and is being held in custody.
Durk Banks is charged in connection with an attack that killed the cousin of a rival rapper.
Lil Durk might have got a lot of money, but he also got a lot of heat. He was a rapper who landed $40 million deals with his record label, Only the Family. But he might lose everything with his latest legal problems. Despite the best efforts of his legal team, Lil Durk is having a tough time getting out of jail, let alone proving he wasn't involved with a murder. Lil Durk's problems can be traced back to 2022. Lil Pab, also known as Saviaya Robinson, the cousin of rapper Quando Rondo, was gunned down at a gas station in West Hollywood. The shooting went down on August 19, 2022, with Rondo present and surviving the attack. As with most attacks on rappers, this shooting was suspected of being planned. The likely suspects were the members of Durk's Only the Family record label. They had the motive of revenge for the murder of OTF's own King Von. Quando Rondo's crew fought with King Von outside an Atlanta nightclub on November 6, 2020. What started as a gunfight quickly became a gunfight, with Lil Tim delivering the fatal shot.
I think so, I ain't gonna lie, I was kinda like, by me getting shot, I kinda was like not in a full state of mind. It's like a lot of ringing going on in my ear, I guess, from all the gunshots.
Although Rondo didn't say much during the incident, he did spit out implied lyrics about the event in End of Story. And even though he claimed the attack was self-defense, that probably didn't matter to OTF. One of their own had been smoked by a rival. So targeting Rondo himself seemed like the ultimate payback for OTF losing a king. In October 2024, members of Only the Family were arrested for their involvement in a conspiracy to commit murder. The names included Kayvon Grant, DeAndre Wilson, Keith Jones, David Lindsay, and Asa Houston. But a co-conspirator highlighted in the case was Durk Devontae Banks, aka Lil Durk. He was believed to be the mastermind of the hired murder. While Durk wasn't the first to be arrested, his involvement as a co-conspirator soon led to his arrest. What evidence was there that Lil Durk ordered the hit? Well, his raps are the evidence. The government used Durk's own lyrics against him. His music implied a celebration of the money he would be making after a revenge murder. The song in question was Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy. Right after the lyrics, look on the news and see your son you screaming. Durk samples Quando Rondo screaming, "No," from news footage. But Durk's legal team bit back hard against this claim. They denied this evidence based on the timing. Durk's song had been recorded months before the murder of Lil Pab. The song couldn't have been about the targeting of Rondo if the hit didn't go down. So, how did Rondo's words end up in the song? Well, they officially didn't. That sampling was not in the official song, but a fan-edited version that spread around on social media.
His lawyers say prosecutors misled the grand jury by alleging Durk bragged about the attack in a song. They say that song was recorded 7 months before the killing, and they add that Durk has no connection to a modified version later posted on YouTube.
That should have cleared Durk easily, but you know how viral videos on social media go. Once it's out there, you can't really stop it. But Lil Durk's legal team had more evidence to clear the song as evidence. The music itself was never officially released, and Durk's been very open about producing that song. He claims his engineers and producers never intended for the song to feature the Rondo sample. So the fans painted their own picture of Durk boasting about a hit. The government isn't making a good case here with edited music being used as evidence. That was pretty much the only smoking gun they had. Lil Durk's indictment only happened because of that song, which was presented to a grand jury. That's some weak heat to cook with. Without those lyrics, no indictment. With phony evidence being used, Lil Durk had a strong case for making bond. But did the government stop there? Of course they didn't. They tried to hit back harder with another indictment. The first grand jury hearing was a disaster with the false lyrics, but that didn't stop the feds. They still thought that they had plenty of info to nail Lil Durk. And apparently it was. The government got its second grand jury indictment. The use of credit cards to get his crew to California was used as evidence for the hit. Lil Durk was also seen as a flight risk. Fearing he'd flee the country, the government stressed the rapper should be detained and denied bond. And rappers know full well how easy it is to get convicted by the feds. Even Quando Rondo recognized the hot water Lil Durk is in.
Them niggas who be having 40 years, who done did 40 years and they in prison, and you see them and they don't look like they did their time, you know why? Cause they got their ass turned to a f***ing baby.
Well, the feds might have bit back, but Lil Durk didn't take that attack lying down. The rapper gave his own response to make his own case for release. A court doc was revealed with Lil Durk's response, titled Defendant Durk Banks' Reply in support of his application for reconsideration of detention order. It's the more official way of Durk arguing, I ain't supposed to be here. The strongest argument in this claim concerns the issue previously covered. The song wasn't good enough as evidence for being detained, and since it was taken out of the government's second indictment, they knew it wasn't good enough. So let's get into the complete response from Lil Durk and his legal team. After making the declaration from Durk and his lawyers, the doc gets into the specifics with the introduction. That part reads, on December 12, 2024, this court held a detention hearing and ultimately ordered that Mr. Banks, aka Lil Durk, be detained based on two factors, danger and flight risk. On the issue of danger, the court relied primarily on facts presented in the first superseding indictment. The issue of flight risk, this court admitted, was a closer call. As the court is aware, the probation department assessed that Mr. Banks was not a flight risk, but did recommend detention based on dangerousness. So the court essentially said that while they didn't have the evidence, they still had a bad vibe about Lil Durk. This would seem like an easy angle to attack, but it wasn't in the first response. Durk's legal team initially focused on the bad lyrics not being good enough. Perhaps Durk's lawyers thought that was enough for bond, but it wasn't. Now they've got to go after the declaration of Durk being dangerous.
5 members of Durk's Only the Family group, also known as OTF, were indicted by a California grand jury this week on charges of conspiracy to commit murder for hire.
As the document continues, since that hearing, the landscape has shifted. On May 1st, 2025, the government filed a second superseding indictment, which removed 2 major allegations from the first superseding indictment. First, it removed the allegation that Mr. Banks' song lyrics somehow glorified the murder of SR, referring to Xavier Robinson, aka Lul Pab. And second, it removed the allegation that Mr. Banks directed others to pay or be paid a bounty for the murder. Importantly, the government returned to the grand jury and sought this second superseding indictment after, and apparently in response to, Mr. Banks filing his motion to dismiss the indictment and his application for reconsideration of the detention order. In essence, the government effectively conceded Mr. Banks' central argument in his application for reconsideration that the government presented false and/or misleading information about Mr. Banks to the grand jury and to this court concerning critical factual allegations. So, that covers what the court got wrong about the case. Now comes the calling out of foul play. The document continues. In its response and supplemental filing, the government downplays these changes as immaterial and undeserving of this court's consideration. However, as detailed below, they are both appropriate and of great import in this court's review of the statutory factors for release. With the issues of the lyrics and the payout of a bounty altogether abandoned, what remains of the indictment is a weak patchwork of unsupported and non-specific allegations against Mr. Banks. This watered-down new indictment, coupled with the robust bond package proposed here, tips the balance in favor of Mr. Banks' release of pending trial. Okay, so now that we've got the problems addressed, it's time to start swinging. The next part of the document addresses the argument for Lil Durk. This is where the legal arsenal really gets unleashed. The first section of the argument is titled, "The weight of the evidence has changed since the initial detention order." It reads, 18 U.S.C. 3142 requires that the court look at the weight of the evidence against a person to determine whether there are conditions of release that will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of any other person and the community. With the new indictment in mind, the alleged weight of the evidence against Mr. Banks is significantly weaker. Lil Durk's legal team came out swinging. The edited song lyrics don't make a good case for Durk's arrest. However, there are still some lingering doubts in the case. The facts remain that Lil Durk did pay for the flights of his OTP crew, and they were proven to have committed the murder. There's also video evidence of the crew following around Quando Rondo before the murder went down.
Durk is accused of paying 5 people to kill a rival in LA. Thursday. Prosecutors say the plot was revenge for the murder of another Chicago rapper in 2020. The shooting that happened outside a popular LA shopping mall missed the alleged target, but killed his cousin.
That's still damning, but the case against Bond is now less convincing. Now that the evidence is targeted as weak, it's time to attack the specifics of the indictment. The section continues. First, the second superseding indictment removed paragraph 6 of the introductory allegations in the first superseding indictment, which relied on lyrics from a song to allege that Mr. Banks was somehow celebrating or commercially glorifying the death of Saviea Robinson, aka Lil Durk. This was a hotly contested issue at the detention hearing. With the second superseding indictment, the government has now conceded the issue entirely, despite the fact that it took up a significant portion of the detention hearing. To be clear, the inclusion of the now removed portion referencing song lyrics was more than immaterial fluff in the first superseding indictment. The government absolutely intended that section to illustrate direct involvement in the alleged murder for hire, and more importantly, the knowledge of Mr. Banks of the alleged offense through some sort of musical confession. The government has now been proven wrong and has removed the reference, substantially depreciating the weight of the allegations. Okay.
I don't care if that track's a banger, you can go right to your cell.
Told me they got an addy, go. Got location, go.
Got indicted,
go.
No probation,
go. Green light, go.
So there's the lyrics covered. Now the argument shifts towards Lil Durk paying for the hit. The argument continues. Of equal or even greater import, the second superseding indictment removed paragraph 9 of the original indictment, which alleged that Mr. Banks directed others to pay a bounty for the killing of Saviea Robinson. This material change also significantly impacts the court's calculation, as this court in the initial detention hearing specifically cited the government's allegation that Banks exercised control of others and that other people acted at his direction to find dangerousness. This all lines up with what went down at the first detention hearing. To make that point clear, the argument also quotes from that hearing. That quote was, "Although the allegations are not that the defendant personally pulled the trigger, the allegations are the defendant exercised a significant amount of control over other individuals and that those individuals were acting at this direction." After providing receipts on the faulty hearing, the argument goes on. Now, with the payment of the bounty allegation withdrawn from the indictment, the foundation for this court's conclusions has been materially undercut. Outside of the allegations in the new indictment, the government can only point to ambiguous and insubstantial pieces of evidence, i.e. one singular text message subject to a variety of interpretations alleged to have been sent by Mr. Banks. The message being talked about here involves Lil Durk and flights. In that text, he said, "Don't book no flights that have nothing to do with me or my name." Let's get back to the argument now. No other specific or direct evidence has been provided to date, including any evidence showing Mr. Banks's alleged control of others. The government continually refers to in the previous indictments and in their arguments before this court. The bulk of the government's contentions include its own proffered generalizations that seemingly come from an informant whose veracity and credibility has never been subject to challenge, to support the false notion that Mr. Banks is or ever has been a danger. That's a strong case so far, but there's some stuff the legal team can't deny.
Lil Durk, whose real name is Durk Banks, is facing 2 additional felony charges, including conspiracy. He's accused of conspiring with others to murder a rival rapper in Los Angeles in 2022, but the shooters missed their intended target and killed someone else.
They do cede some ground, though. Remember when we mentioned the evidence of Lil Durk's crew casing Quando and Lil Durk? Well, that gets addressed in the next paragraph of the doc. While it is true that the second superseding indictment also added an additional charge of stalking, the addition is immaterial to the question of detention as the allegation already existed in the first superseding indictment. No new allegations are contained in the stalking charge of the second superseding indictment. With the lack of evidence for denying bond, the next subsection goes over the conditions and assures there's no flight risk. Mr. Banks has filed a robust bond package which outlines a variety of conditions to secure the safety of the community and ensure that Mr. Banks complies with all conditions imposed by this court. One of the conditions that Mr. Banks proposed was the use of a 24/7 licensed security company. This court expressed concern that the presence of a security company providing security for the defendant is not going to address the significant concerns with regard to the safety of the community here, because the security company would be acting at the direction and under the guidance of the defendant. The government argued that the security would be present for the physical protection of Mr. Banks. Okay, that's a lot, but the doc thankfully narrows down some specifics. To clarify, the purpose of the security company, detailed in the bond package, would be to enforce the terms and conditions of the bond set by this court. Specifically, if there is an order regarding curfew or home confinement, the security company would serve as a prophylactic measure to ensure Mr. Banks's compliance with those conditions. Put another way, the security company would be beholden to this court, not Mr. Banks, though he would be the one footing the bill. Both Mr. Banks and the security company are well aware of this agreement and will provide a specific plan regarding the line of communication to the court and/or pretrial services if the court allows release. Basically, there were concerns about security doing their job and keeping an eye on Lil Durk. The security company would essentially be paid by and working for Lil Durk, which initially worried the judge. Durk's legal team is trying to assure the judge that there will be no foul play regarding 24/7 security. That point is clarified in the last sentence of the paragraph. With this check in place, Mr. Banks poses no danger to the community or of fleeing the jurisdiction, as non-compliance would trigger the immediate alert of the court. The big problem with this doc, though, is that it doesn't really address the major concern. Lil Durk is still seen as a flight risk. While this response does try to offer assurance, it doesn't put the worries of the bond to bed. After all, Lil Durk did book flights out of the country when he learned about his crew getting arrested.
He didn't just use the video. I guarantee you, they've got credit card statements showing that he bought these guys tickets to go these guys.
What Lil Durk's team needs here is receipts. They need to prove that the flights out of the country weren't an attempt to ghost the situation. If the legal team can prove Lil Durk didn't book those flights during the arrests, that'd probably be enough to grant bail. But since none of that is here in the response, there are only more suspicions raised. With no more claims to be made, the response closes with its conclusion. Wherefore, based on the change of circumstances created by the second superseding indictment, as well as the significant bond package that includes stringent conditions that would properly rebut the presumption that he is a danger or a flight risk, Mr. Banks respectfully requests this court release him on conditions pending trial. So, the response that Lil Durk should get bond and isn't a flight risk doesn't offer much. It's mostly an argument for a security company to keep tabs on Lil Durk to make sure he doesn't flee the country. The security would report directly to the court or pretrial services, immediately alerting the courts of any attempt by Lil Durk to take off. When it starts, the response does a decent job of making a case for the bond. The usage of false lyrics was pretty damning for the first indictment. Making the government look foolish is a solid tactic for not letting them hold Lil Durk, but as the second indictment proved, they really didn't need that. The flight risk problem was enough to warrant the second superseding indictment without highlighting Durk's fan-edited music. Despite the citing of false evidence, all of this wasn't enough for a bond deal. The judge wouldn't listen to that deal as likely as he doesn't listen to Durk's music to notice the errors. Considering how thin this bond package sounds, it's hard not to agree with his decision to keep Lil Durk locked up. But who knows? The judge might find Lil Durk not guilty when more evidence is revealed. But considering there's a lack of evidence to disprove Durk's dangerous nature, things don't look good for OTF rapper. The bond and case could be easily resolved if we got the truth about when those international flights were made. Without that key info, the case is still uncertain, but definitely not in Lil Durk's favor. If he's innocent, his legal team gotta make a better case than they did in this response.